we are talking about the get my lesson free here. Oh, good, I do have that. We're talking about the 10th letter of the Hebrew alphabet, which is the Yod, and it go right directly above my head, which is kind of neat because it's the power of God. And this is just the second day we're talking about the Yod, so you really haven't missed that much on this one yet. In Kabbalah, which is basically Jewish mysticism, and I don't want you to leave here thinking, I don't teach Kabbalah. I simply mention some of the Kabbalistic beliefs so that we understand what they believe, okay? In Kabbalah, Ein Sof, which literally means without end, is the term used to describe God prior to creation. Ein Sof is usually translated as the infinite one. The major context of the Jewish mystical tradition, the Sefer HaZohar, or Book of Splendor, or simply referred to as Zohar, reveals a process of creation that started deep within the hidden recesses of the formless Ein Sof, or our God, and unfolded as a series of emanations. Now, that's a mouthful, but what it basically is saying is that before time began, before anything was created, God was, and God was all that there was. We talked about that last week, but just to reemphasize that. So, the Book of Splendor, as they call it, reveals the process of creation that began with the hidden recesses of the formless God, okay? God has no physical shape. He is a spiritual being. The Bible says God is a spirit and we must worship him in spirit and in truth. So keep that in mind as we go through this. The central aspect of this drama was a single point, okay? A single point, and that's important, that gave forth light and sowed the holy seed, creating a cosmic conception that is depicted as an explosion of light, which is another aspect of the Big Bang. Now, when I say the single point, as I've told you last week, a yod is a point. You put your pen down to write anything before you even move it. If you pick it back up in that little dot, that is a yod. The yod is the smallest letter of the Hebrew alphabet. It is tiny in comparison because it's the opposite in a sense. It is showing the power of God through this tiny little letter, this tiny little point. So it was a single point that brought forth the creation. Okay? Now we have all of these letters. We have 22 letters. This is basically the middle letter. It's the 10th letter out of 22. But it is that letter that has the most significance of all the 22 letters. So you picked a good day to be here. Since Ein Sof is indescribable and unknowable, then we have to describe and know God in some other form. Kabbalists say that Ein Sof reveals himself through 10 attributes of God, which the Jews call sefirot. And the sefirot are attributes of God. That's the best way I can explain it. The Zohar says, within the most hidden recesses, a flame of darkness issued from the mysterious Ein Sof. The flame was neither white nor black, nor red nor green, of no color at all, which is kind of hard for us to imagine. It was not knowable at all. In other words, it wasn't possible to know the beginning of God, because God had no beginning. But I find this a little bit ironic, because it says it was unknowable. Well, there was no one to know it. So how could it be knowable if there was no one to know it? It was not knowable at all until one hidden sublime point, there's that point again, gave forth light. Beyond that point, nothing is known. So from the point where creation began, before that, we cannot know. The most brilliant minds that ever lived cannot know what God was before. But through these 10 attributes, we can know what God is for us. Therefore, it is called the beginning, the first utterance of all. The beginning sowed the holy seed in order to beget offspring for the benefit of the world. The beginning started with the concept of contraction, or Tsimtsum. And we talked about Tsimtsum last week. It's not significant except for the fact that, as I said, God filled all of the existence before creation. And if God filled all of the existence, there was no room for the creation. So God contracted his essence so that there would be room for the world to be created. And we know how immense our world, our galaxy, our universe is. So it gives you a small concept of how God must have contracted himself in order to do so. Okay, hand out the first page, honey. The Ein Sof, or the infinite one, contracted itself to its centermost point, and then withdrew to the sides of the circle surrounding that point in order to create a vacuum. The reason for the Ein Sof's contraction was this: for the creation of the finite world to occur. The infinite needed to define an empty space where its finite existence could exist separately from itself, separately but reactively. So what this is saying is that, remember now, this is the Kabbalistic viewpoint, okay? This is not necessarily something that I need you to learn and know. It's something I need you to understand. That this is the way the Jews historically have explained creation. Man, who has a finite mind, I mean, a mind that is only expandable to a certain extent. You know, they say that mankind only uses 1/10 of the capacity of his brain, but it is a finite brain. There's only so much. Even Einstein and the great mathematicians, there's only so much they can expand their brain. But lost my train of thought here. Okay. So God contracted himself to its centermost part. And this diagram that's going around, it's just a possible example of what they're saying, okay? So the Jews, what I was getting at was mankind has a need to know, a thirst for knowledge, you might say. And to not know about God is a huge void in our lives. If we don't know about God, then how can we know God? So this is why the Jews have come up with this theory, this explanation of how God was and how God created. Okay. From the edge of the vacuum, Ein Sof issued a ray of light that launched all of creation. The sequence of events is complicated, but in essence, Ein Sof's light manifested 10 divine emanations. Now, I'll talk about the emanations here in a minute. You can pass out the second sheet now, and everybody gets one of these.
Yeah. Just take one and pass it on.
Again, the Kabbalists have a little different viewpoint than we do as Christians. The Kabbalists explain that God created through his immanent light. Okay, through light. We claim that God spoke the world into existence. That's the only difference in that. And whether you want to say one is right and one is wrong, but the Bible basically does say that God spoke the word and it became reality. Okay, these 10 emanations are attributes of God himself. They are Keter, Chokmah, Binah, Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferet, Natzach, Chod, Yosod, and Malkut. I'm only pronouncing those for you just so you can know how they're actually pronounced. You will find them on the Kabbalistic Tree of Life. Now that first handout that I sent you has a small diagram of the Kabbalistic Tree of Life. I don't put stock in that except for the fact that it shows the order of the attributes, and it shows the name, and it shows the Hebrew lettering. Okay, that's the only reason we use this. The next sheet that you're going to get will have a bigger diagram where you can see it more easily. Now, the interesting thing about this, these are 10 attributes of God. In some of the diagrams, they will have in the center, they will have actually an 11th attribute right here on your chart. And on the next one, you'll see it. It's not emblazoned like the other ones are. It's kind of faint, but it is there in the center. It's not really one of the attributes. It's called Da'at, D-A-A-T. And it is, basically, it reflects all of the 10 attributes together. That's why you find it in the center. And
It's basically a connector, right?
I'm sorry?
It's just basically a connector for all of them.
Yeah, it's 10 is what they claim, but some of the Kabbalists include it as an 11th, although they don't call it an attribute, okay? All right. Da'at in particular represents Keter, which is the crown or the top attribute, in its knowledgeable form, the concept of knowledge itself. The countings of the sefirot, or which these attributes are called sefirot by the Jews. The countings of the sefirot produce 10 powers. Sefer Yitzhak, by either including Keter or Da'at. So when you look at this next chart that's going to come around, the da'at or the keter are have a symbiotic relationship with one another. So you either include one or the other. You don't include them both. Okay. Now again, none of that is important to us. It's just something I want you to know and understand a little bit of. The first sefirot, the top one, is the keter, the crown, which describes the divine superconscious will of God that is beyond conscious intellect. So the crown, we say that something is the crowning effect or the crowning deed. It is the top, the pinnacle. Okay? Keter, again, the crown, is the intermediary between God and the other conscious sefirot. 3 different levels or heads are identified within keter. In some contexts, the highest level of keter is called the unknowable head. Now, the second head is the head of nothingness, Resha Dait. And the third level is the long head, Resha Darich. This one's hard for me to say. Resha Darich. These 3 heads correspond to the superconscious levels of faith, pleasure, and will. And basically, we would call these Father, Son, Holy Spirit, the Trinity aspect of God. And they're not physical heads. Again, these are spiritual aspects of God. The next 3 sefirot, Chokhmah, which is wisdom, Binah, understanding, and Da'at, or knowledge, they are independent opposites. Chokhmah is wisdom, Binah is understanding, Chesed is loving kindness. The 6 subsequent sefirot, Gevurah, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, and Malkut, describe the primary and secondary conscious divine emotions. Gevurah is discipline, might, or judgment. Tiferet is glory or beauty. Netzach is victory. Hod is splendor. Yesod is foundation. And Malkut is kingdom, sovereignty, or the Shekinah divine presence. Now, the reason I'm giving you these is because these are attributes of God. God is wisdom. God is knowledge. God is loving kindness. God is God is glory and beauty. God is victory. God is splendor. God is the foundation. And God is the kingdom and the Shekinah divine presence of God. So all of these are attributes of God, and this is the reason why they are important. Because through these attributes of God, we can know God better. We know him by his acts of mercy, his acts of kindness. We know him by his benevolence. We know him by his mercy. We know him by his strength that he gives to us each day. Okay. Each of these sefirot represent one aspect of the Godhead, a facet of the powers of the all-powerful. As all levels of creation are constructed around these 10 sefirot, their names in Kabbalah describe the particular role each plays in forming reality. So each of the names of these actually have power in the creation of God's universe. These are the external dimensions of the sefirot, describing their functional roles in channeling the divine creative, or as OHR, which is light, to all levels. Yeah, okay.
You know, Dave, I was wondering, these Israelis that have been hostages for all these days, and that's, you wonder, would this be something they would be thinking about maybe in their prayers and those words, you know? And like the Shekinah goes with them in their exile, that sort of thing.
If they are religious Jews, this is what gets them through.
Yeah.
Counting on God. And it may be why they have survived.
That's right.
Because God's presence is with them. And they acknowledge it. This is how the Jews lived through the Holocaust, is by trusting in these 10 attributes of God.
Actually thinking about these
Thinking
things,
about
these words.
Praying
their
about them.
situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. As the sefirot are viewed to comprise both metaphorical lights as well as vessels. Now, we've talked in the past about the fallen sparks and the vessels that conveyed those sparks. Well, those vessels are contained in these sefirot. Their structural role describes the particular identity each sephirah possesses from its characteristic vessel. Underlying this functional structure of the sefirot, each one possesses a hidden inner spiritual motivation that inspires its activity. This forms the particular characteristic of inner light within each sephirah. Now, this is important because it is the inner light. Now, again, they are the Kabbalists refer to the light as being the point of creation. Okay? Well, I don't want to get ahead of myself. Let me go on just a little further. The reason we study these sefirot at all is because they represent aspects of who God is, and we may come to know him better through knowledge of them. So the more we understand these 10 attributes of God, the better we can know God. And remember that when Jesus said, "Depart from me, you workers of iniquity, I knew you not," it means he did not have an intimate knowledge of us the way we are commanded to know him. Okay, so the more we know him, the closer we are to him. This is the Kabbalistic view of creation. But the Kabbalists do agree that the letter Yod represents God the Creator. It is the foundation of all foundations, the hidden divine spark which causes everything to be. It represents the power of the Spirit to govern and guide the creation. Now, you notice I've mentioned the hidden inner spark. You can hand out the next one, hon. The hidden inner spark. We talked at the letter preceding the Yod is the Tet, and we said that the Tet had a hidden goodness within it. Okay, well, now we're going to discover what that actually is. The holy name of God starts with the Yod. It is small in form, but the meaning of the Yod is great. And as you see on this, when it's being handed around now, the Yod is the smallest of the letters, and it's the smallest of all the letters. And there is a yod in every letter. If you notice that little dot at the top, where it swirls up just a little bit. On every letter, there is a yod. Okay. The yod is an infinite dot, the essence of all life. It is the foundation of all foundations. Everything comes from it and returns to it. It is a hidden dot beyond imagination, formless, the source of all thought, beyond all thoughts, beyond time and space. It is the secret, hidden principle of the universe that we can't perceive. It is the divine spark of life that is in every single being. It cannot be grasped, but it is in every cell of your body, causing you to exist. It has no mass or density, time or space. It is the power of the Spirit to govern and guide the matter of material world. Okay, it is in every cell of your body. Now, scientists can break down the cells. They can break down the particles into atoms. They can get a grasp of these things. I don't think they ever really can understand them because the depth is beyond our understanding. But the letter yod, the point of creation, is in every cell of our being. Now, God did this so that when Adam and Eve had children, they were able to pass down the ability to create life through those children. Every cell of their bodies had the point of creation, the yod in it, okay? And it is in every cell of our body. Now, they can't find it. They wouldn't know what to look for. But it is there.
Hey, Dave.
Yeah.
You're talking about what we don't know and things like that. If you remember when John Wooden, who won 10 national championships, and after he won his 10th, they said, "When did you know you were a great coach?" He said, "When I found out, I didn't know anything." The closer you grow to God, you appreciate more, and you realize how much you don't know.
How much you don't know. Yeah, that's good.
I wonder if they'll be able to find it with AI.
No, there are certain things God does not want us to know.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of them. The letter yod is the smallest suspended point, reveals the spark of essential good hidden within the letter tet. So the letter tet has a yod hidden inside it. And the yod is the next letter. And it is, remember I said, when you get it to the letter tet, you're in the letter of decision. And if you decide to accept Christ, you decide to accept that point of creation, then you move on to the next letter, which is the yod. But if you refuse to accept Christ, you remain in the basket with a snake. You remain in the hands of the devil, basically. So it is a decision that you have to make to receive the next letter, which is the yod. Let's see. Where did I stop? Okay. Subsequent to the initial Tsimtsum, or contraction, of God's infinite light in order to make a place for creation, there remained within the empty void a single potential point or impression. And that basically is what you see in the void inside the letter Tet. Yod, hand out the next one, honey. I think that's the last one, yeah. Yod, the dot that was involved in the creation. The jot, or tittle as Jesus called it, that wrote the world into existence. It was this little letter. And that's the irony of it. That God, who is all powerful, all omnipotent, omniscient, is everything. And the God who is so powerful created the world through the tiniest little point, tiniest letter, tiniest little point, dot. Amazing. The secret of this point is the power of the infinite to contain the miracle within himself and express it to its apparent external reality. Finite manifestation begins from a zero-dimensional point, thereafter developing into a one-dimensional line and a two-dimensional surface. And we are three-dimensional beings. But it all comes from that single dot. Following the Tsimtsum, the power of limitation became revealed, and though it may seem strange, the infinite essence of God that originally hid the power of limitation now himself became hidden, not in reality, but only from our limited human perspective, within the point of contracted light. From within this point of limitation is revealed the secret of the 10 sefirot, the divine channels of light through which God continually brings his world into being. Okay. I got 5 more minutes. The power and ability of the Ein Sof is called the Ein Sof, or the light of the Ein Sof, or the light of God. Because physical light is perceived as being ethereal and intangible, because light gives life and warmth, it is often used in Kabbalah as a metaphor for divine power. This is what Malachi the prophet meant when he spoke, I, God, change not. God remains the same after creation as before. In other words, the creation did not alter God. He contracted his essence, but he remained God. He remained as powerful after the creation as he was before the creation. He remains totally aloof from any change within the creation. All change took place within a manifestation of revealed power, or the Ein Sof, the light of God. In Genesis 1:3, God says, let there be light, and there was light. And that is the light. The Kabbalah says that is the light that created the world. And remember, I told you that is not sunlight or artificial light of any kind. The light that God's referring to there, in the very first thing he says, let there be light, he meant let my light be upon this world and in this world. Okay? But it is not the light that created it. It was when God said, let there be light. Okay? There's the real difference. And the reason I even mention all this Kabbalistic stuff, because I really don't want you to get involved in Kabbalah, because it gets weird. It gets weird. But the basic concept of how they explain God and his creation are helpful to us, that we might know God better. all change took place within a manifestation of revealed power or the light of God. When it arose in God's will to create the world, God measured out within himself, in potential, what would exist in actuality. This act of measuring out is referred to as engraving letters. These letters signify the structuring and formation of the divine will prior to the contraction. They are the potential for limitation that existed within the light of God. Okay, this is where I'll stop, and I won't dwell so much on the Kabbalah at this point, but I do want you to know that. That's why I handed out these papers for you all to take home with you and look at. And you might keep them as a point of reference when you're studying, because as we go through these letters, we will be referring to those sefirot, to those attributes of God. Okay, so this is kind of a study guide for you. Okay, that's where I'm going to stop. It's exactly 10:30. Any questions, comments, or concerns? There we go.
Just, I don't mean for this to be a
It's
long,
okay,
it's
honey.
kind of a yes or
Just
no.
kidding.
And we can talk about it more later, but, this, okay, we're talking about the contraction of God, of him making himself smaller for the creation of the universe and everything in it. Then what about the contraction of time, where, things can be said to be millions of years old, but yet it's only 6,000 years? And remember, we kind of talked about that before. Do you think that when God contracted the universe for the creation, at that same time he did the contraction of time?
Well, before the creation, there was no time.
Yeah.
So time was something that was included in the creation. It all happened at the same, I hate to use the word same time because there was no time, but
Yeah.
it all happened at the same time as the creation. So whether he contracted that time at that point, that's questionable. It's hard to, impossible to really answer.
Well, you did stop time with Joshua once.
Yes.
So
Stop the sun.
yeah, from moving. So
Mm-hmm.